In this video, I want to give a demonstration about how if we can recompile our APK, we can actually modify the logic to bypass specific checks in the program, allowing us to potentially gain access to things that we shouldn't be able to as, say, root, for instance. So you saw in this application when we first started running it that it had root detection in it. So it would say whether or not we were running this application on a rooted device or not. And it would probably limit our functionality if we were running on a rooted device. And this tends to be a very common feature in a lot of applications. A lot of applications are set to detect if a device is rooted and do things about it if it is. So in order to bypass this, we have to be able to alter our APK, which we saw in the last video was possible to do. And the specific code that we're looking at is located in post login. And you can find this just by searching for things like rooted device, device not rooted, and we can see that we set these texts inside of this function here. So the idea is we want to modify this code to remove this check. We want it to always say that our device is not rooted. And in order to do this, we're going to have to modify the assembly code because as you're able to see here, we can't really alter the code in this jar file, right? So we need to be able to alter it through the assembly code. So I'm going to walk you through the general process of how we do this. To start off, we need to go into our APK tool decompile. And we need to locate this specific code in our assembly. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into my Smalley. I'm going to go into COM Android Insecure Bank v2. And this is located in post login. So let's find post login in here. It's located right here. I use the main one rather than these piece files here. So we're going to use this file here. And all we need to do to find this code is we just have to search for this specific function. So I'm going to search for show root status. And we're looking for this declaration here. So .method declares the actual method, and the method name is show root status. So you can see here we go through and we do a few different things. This part here is comparing a value to this string system app superuser.apk. So you see this is doing the actual if statement comparison to see if this actually exists. This is also associated with that existence check. And then we come through and we do a few other different things, and we can see here that this looks to be the place where we're doing the is rooted check to say, you know, if it is rooted, we're going to go to a specific location. Otherwise, we're going to go to condition 2. So if we take a look at both of these locations here, when we look at condition 2 is where we do the device not rooted logic. So ideally, we want to be able to jump at some point in order to set it so that it always goes to condition 2 no matter what. And we can see generally this is the place where we're checking to see if we should go to condition 2. It's checking V0 and V1, and based on the result of that check, it's going to either go to condition 2 or it's going to fall through here and go to the rooted device portion. In order to avoid it from ever going to that part where it's setting the rooted device text, what we can do is we can utilize a goto. A goto will always jump to a specific location no matter what happens. So to do that, I'm going to copy the syntax up here, essentially. And you can take a look around at like any of the go-tos that exist, and we can sort of like, you know, copy these different go-tos and such. And, you know, in general, there's a lot of different ways that we can actually achieve this general idea. We could actually modify that like equality check, for instance, to do so. But yeah, we're generally going to copy this sort of like go-to methodology here. So I'm going to copy this line here. I'm going to move it up to where we had our other check. And I've lost it here. It should be right here. Yeah. So we're going to add this goto here. And rather than going to 1, what we're going to do is we're going to go to condition 2. What we've essentially modified this to do is it's going to check the is rooted piece. And if it is not rooted, it goes to condition 2. Normally, if it is rooted, it would just fall through and go through to here and do all the rooted device stuff. However, now that I've added this goto, what happens is it says if it's not equal, then it goes to condition 2 to say that it's not rooted. Otherwise, it also goes to condition 2 to say that it's not rooted. So I've made it so that no matter what happens, we always go to the not rooted portion of the program. So with this, we can go ahead and recompile our APK, and I'm going to demonstrate what this actually does to the source code because I think it's quite interesting to see that connection. So let's go ahead and build our APK. So we'll say apk-tool.bat b insecure bank v2. We'll let that build a new copy. It might take a minute or so. While that's loading, I'll just go ahead and navigate us to the distribution section so that we're ready to take that file once it's ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this through the dex to jar just to see what the jar file ends up being. Because I think that in general, this will be something that's quite interesting to see what generally happens when we do this. So again, this is going to take a few minutes for it to actually run through. And basically, like what's going to end up happening is like this super user section here is going to change for us. So let's go ahead and copy this over to our dex2jar section. And I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to go close this here. And I'm just going to delete these two files so that they don't interfere with this. And I'll copy this over. And what we're going to do is we're just going to generally run like our dex2jar in the same way that we ran it before, right? So we're just going to do our d2j hyphen dex2jar.bat, and we're going to pass it in this insecure bank v2 apk. So we'll do our insecure bank v2.apk. Oh, sorry, and I have to cd into that directory for that to work. So cd into that directory, and then we'll run our dex2jar. And you'll see after a minute it will load there, and then it will give us that jar file, right? So now let's go ahead and decompile it using JADX to see what ended up happening. So I'll load up the JADX GUI here, open up our jar file. It will take it a minute to process, and then we'll go to that code and see what ends up changing. And in general, this procedure of checking to see what changes in the code as we modify it is one way that we can work with reverse engineering and changing this APK. And generally, you can learn a lot of this just by reading the Smalley code from the application and looking at what the Java code corresponding to it is. And then you can utilize that to be able to learn more about how the program actually runs, right? So you can see here what ended up happening is this if statement now does nothing. So the if statement does nothing, and then it just sets the text to device not rooted. So you can see that we actually successfully modified this logic and program flow. So now we've completely removed anything that happens when that check is true. So by that, we've effectively modified the root detection status to be able to bypass that root detection. We can apply this logic in a lot of different places, right? For instance, like in the login, we can write our own logic to be like, if the login is submitted, just let us in, right? It's a lot more complicated to do something like that, but since we're able to build and recompile the APK, we're able to do this sort of modification. So I just wanted to demonstrate this example because I think it's quite interesting to see how we can actually modify the APK code and rebuild it to be able to actually modify the code of this APK and change the way it functions. Like before, we could sign and upload this file to be able to use it on our devices. With the root detection status, I don't have a rooted device, unfortunately, so I can't really show you what ends up happening, but obviously we can see from this, it will just end up showing device not rooted no matter what we do, which is really great for us. So this is just one way that we're able to modify that code. So this is another vulnerability that we can utilize to be able to exploit this APK.